Okay, let's start. The topic is quite relevant, and today we're going to talk about relocation in IT, stress resistance, and psychological self-diagnostics. A few words about myself. I have been working in IT for more than 20 years. I was born and I grew up in Crimea. I lived in Crimea, in Simferopol, in Yalta, in Nikolaevka. Then I lived in Donetsk, I lived in Kiev, in Zaporizhia, and even in Donetsk. Then I moved to Minsk, and I live in Minsk so far. Besides that, I have experience working in the United States, in Canada, and I have often business trips in UAE and EU. Well, I have very indirect relation to the medicine and medical sector, using math for differential diagnostic and psychiatry. The second specialist who prepared to prepare this presentation is Alexei Kazak, an experienced psychiatrist. So it will be more professional view on the topic. We have quite an extensive agenda for this presentation, but what will be the result of our presentation?
We're going to discuss the algorithm for such important decision making as relocation or not relocation to another country or return back to the country. For many people, it might sound even more terrifying when they found enough courage to leave the country, but to return back, that's a different story. Also, there will be a whole set of other medical approaches for self-diagnosis adopted for people that you can apply daily. I guess the formulation of the problem and its relevance is self-evident. And let us start by definitions. Simply because in this field, all of us are not professionals, and then sometimes we get bogged down in confusion. Let's start with such thing as anxiety. Anxiety is the feeling of internal discomfort which can appear as a threat of which is real but often not real, and is accompanied by activation of vegetative and nervous system. So classically, you have high heartbeat, increased blood tension. We get red in our face and sweat on our palms of the vegetative system. Usually there are three answers, which is a possibility. It comes from the animal world. It's not millions of years old. It might be even as old as the life exists on the planet, like beat, run, or play dead. For instance, a big dog attacks you, and depending on your temperament, you intuitively either will try to find a stick to beat it back or run, or lose consciousness as an opossum, which in many uncertain situations, or many insects, play dead. There is yet another important term, which is fear, and you see that they are different from each other. Fear is a normal physiological and psychological reaction to a real threat, or danger, or feeling of danger or threat. Of course, when we're talking about premonition, like for instance, we have a rational fear about aliens. Another important term here would be phobia and depression. Phobia is the excessive and ungrounded fear launched by the expectation of some kind of object or circumstance. Phobias are well known to us. The banal thing is xenophobia, kinophobia. I see that in Yerevan. There are many peaceful, smiling dogs, but if you're afraid of dogs, you might not enjoy your walk along the streets of Yerevan because dogs are all over the place lying around in the streets. And if we speak about depression, then it's reduction of the mood, loss of interest, and the ability to enjoy oneself, accompanied by higher tiredness rate, which is important because in our layman's terms, we often say that I'm suffering from depression, I'm depressed. Girls often like to claim that depending on the level of hormones, they're depressed. The dominating part in this definition is the uh, frequent change in the mood. All of us are prone to mood swings, but here the depressed mood can be as long as weeks or months. Otherwise, it's not a depression. Next thing is loss of interest and ability to enjoy oneself from things that we used to enjoy, even the most basic things. I don't know, like eating food, doing sports, communicating with friends. We stop enjoying it and start avoid these things. And of course, you get tired quite frequently. If you start noticing such telltale signs, go to the doctor straight away because it's unadvisable to start treating yourself when you're not a medical professional. In the same way, you cannot go to a drugstore and ask for special medication. It's better to be uh, safe than sorry. So better go to the doctor and get it fixed. Whenever some serious changes happen, depression can be aggravated, and you're entering it gradually, not at one fell swoop. And as a classical example, when a frog can get boiled in a hot milk, the same thing can happen here. Stress is the feeling of psychological and physical tension as a response to external effect. Stress is a normal thing that is experienced by the human body. You just need to learn how to control it. And stress resistance is the ability to resist stresses without self destruction or going into disease. And that's it with the definitions. Let's move to something more significant. Seemingly, the Maslow needs pyramid that all of us have heard about. Still, this is a very powerful instrument that you need to use if we're talking about relocation. The main idea of this is that if we have not satisfied the basic foundation levels of the pyramid, the probability that we're going to satisfy higher levels of the pyramid and generally speaking will have the general harmony and satisfaction is very low. Of course, there can be exceptions, but those are exceptions and you shouldn't rely on those. My personal example from my personal life story, I used to work at a company which won the grant to develop software for banking systems, let's say for third world countries. And one of such countries was Afghanistan. That software had to be implemented there. The management looked at our team and decided that if there is a person who can go there, it is me, because I used to be a boxer, professional boxer in the past, and they told, okay, you go. And perhaps from the standpoint of higher level players, it was the proposal of the century, both financially in terms of career making and self implementation, and picture making opportunity when you can tell people about what you have experienced. That I've been to Kandahar and other things. But I finally realized that the safety, health, I, for instance, have 3 children, and thoughts about the future. I don't want to leave them fatherless. That is why I said no to that, and I still am sure 200% that I made the right decision. Maybe it was hard for us to install it remotely, but we still succeeded. But there are other specialists in place. I sometimes interviewed C++ specialists who said that they will do this, and they called back and said, you know what, I'm not going to come back in 1 month, but in 4 months. But then you start asking questions. Maybe this person should not be trusted in the first place. I know why they're changing this time schedule so much. He says, because I'm setting up a stand with the military grade laser in Libya. And while we are still doing it, we're not going to leave that place anyway. And for a childless father or a bachelor, it's a good option, but you need to sort it out. Your wishes, the wishes of your family, and their needs along this pyramid of needs. And it's more likely than not, if the basic levels are not satisfied, this decision will be wrong for you as well. Another powerful instrument that you can use, not only for such decision making, but also in our daily work, that would be the table of stress resistance by Holmes and Ragia. Why and was it developed in the first place? It wasn't developed for medical needs. It was originally developed to make sure that when hiring personnel and subsequently when promoting a person to hyper responsible position, realize whether this person can be 100% reliable and trustworthy or not. If, according to this table, the stress scale, even from some positive things, but still stress will be higher than a certain limit, then there is a chance that this person will stress out, will experience this depression, will start having cognitive distortion, and they will fail the task. Let's look at the first part of the table here, that second part of the table, and seemingly everything starts with something terrible, like the death of your next of kin, divorce, and other things. To get 150 uh, points in this table, it is impossible. Something terrible must happen. But it seems like there's such banal things as a change of place of residence. And if you live within the same city, you move to a neighboring house or change the district of your residence or changing the condition of your residence. You had a private cottage and you move to a flat or other way around. It's already conflict with your family members, and during the relocation or move, it's very hard to be in agreement with everyone, because children who will have to change the kindergarten or school, they are quite stressed about this. Because I remember when I was moving around with my with my parents when I was little, I remember how difficult it was for me. So such a conflict might appear, and you must realize how much during the relocation, how many points will you score. If you score as high as the borderline point, it doesn't mean that you don't have to move. You just need to learn how to control the situation, because some problems might appear with the project. You will be violating deadlines, and that might be cherry on top that can lead to some painful and difficult situations. So for self-diagnosis, you can use the same table. You can download it in internet and get some recommendations how to use it. We have a psychological protection or defense, and ideally speaking, we need to realize when such psychological defense is used by us just to control the situation better. Also, when we prepare ourselves for potential stress, we need to understand what kind of ready to use instruments we have. Some people have many psychological defense measures and they will cover themselves with them. Sometimes we'll make a joke or find some kind of set of means that will protect them. They won't start experiencing some painful problems. But if a person doesn't have many psychological defense mechanisms, then the chance that they simply won't be able to manage it is much higher. And the psychological protection is a means to overcome anxiety and fears. The term was offered by Freud. Psychological defense mechanisms can be different. If we speak about the most primitive of them, they usually happen unconsciously. That would be children's options of psychological defense mechanisms. Classical thing when a little kid is doing, when they're hiding, what they're doing. They're covering their eyes with their palms of their hands. They're covering their ears. I don't want to hear, I don't see anything. Even we adult people, how do we watch horror movies? We sometimes shut our eyes or take somebody's hands and tell ourselves that everything is going to be okay. But if it's a movie, it's going to help. When it is real life, it can lead to a catastrophe. There are some neurotic psychological defense mechanisms which can lead to stable neurosis. They can be higher level, lower level mechanisms, but all of them can lead to psychosomatic situations and many manifestations. Psychosomatic manifestations are more or less a norm, but it's a norm when it happens once a month. When we feel a headache out of stress, it's a typical example of psychosomatic manifestation. But experienced neurologists will ask you about the type of headache and tell you, it's psychosomatic, or it's because of the vascular system. You need to go to the doctor. But in 90% of cases, it will be one of the things like either vascular thing or psychosomatic condition. When you have many problems, when you don't want to rise up from the bed, or when you understand that you're falling apart, your body needs some quality time. You hide under the blanket, and that's how you hide from the stressful situation. Classical thing, avoidance of stuff, or persistent ideas about imminent catastrophe or overestimation of the level of threat. A banal thing, like many things are happening in the world now, and over the past few years, COVID was one of the sources of threat. Some people did not consider it as serious because of the typical defense mechanism as an avoidance. They read some article from the so-called informed person who spoke to a doctor who heard about from somebody who knew that so on and so forth, or other way around. One person is so much afraid he shuts himself at home. He orders foods 1 year ahead. Is walking around wearing mask and washing his hands every 15 seconds. So these are the classical examples. Another thing is intellectualization. All of us, more or less, are thinking rationally in IT, and especially in analysis. It's our main instrument. We try to rationalize everything, even sometimes irrational things. And the psychotherapists find it much difficult to work with such people because, first of all, we as analysts and IT specialists, technicians, are much better than they on this field, and this field is located not elsewhere but in our own heads. We will find 101 reasons why we need, why what we are doing is the right thing, like why I'm not going to my job. Out of 25 reasons, it will be the only reasonable solution that I've chosen, although it might not be so. The same thing, classical example, any person suffering from a dependency like alcohol, any drinker will find you a well argumented, detailed answer why today he must have another drink. If I've decided something, I'm going to drink it anyway. So this is an example of rationalization. Psychotherapists find it very difficult to fight it back. And mature. We are all mature adult people with university degrees. As a rule, we use mature forms of defense like humor, which is the best option, but it might also be suppression, an aesthetic approach, and altruism. That is why, even if you find yourself to be a saint, hermit, or an altruist, you must start thinking about it, whether you're so good a guy, or maybe that is how you try to avoid problems. This is also a sign. Other things, premonition and sublimation, when you can draw things, sing things, study a new programming language and code for your enjoyment, whatever you enjoy the most. This is a very efficient defense mechanisms. And if you find a new hobby for yourself during the relocation, this can reduce significantly the probability of any psychological problems later on. There are also classical scales of depression, which is used for hospitalization. Take my word for it, but statistically, every sixth patient who is hospitalized, I'm not talking about surgery, of course. It's not the matter to be happy about this, but generally speaking, any person who is going to a hospital for at least a day. According to the classification, every sixth of them is suffering from depression, maybe light form of depression. So it's not a so naturally he was anxious about something, maybe objectively, but something he was anxious about. And again, you can Google for it. This scale, it has been in use for many, many years, and it's used not only in the West, in the CIS, it's used as broadly as there. During hospitalization, you're going to get a printout of this with explanation how to fill it in individually, or a doctor can ask you questions. This is a standard operating procedure, so why not use it again for self-diagnosis? And if something goes out of your control, maybe you could decide in favor of going to a doctor. Again, let's speak about cognitive functions, because they can suffer in case of a stress. This is thing that we make money on. These are cognitive functions and our experience. Naturally, there can be attention, memory, thinking, understanding, training, speech, and intellect. And in fact, people were thinking about it a long time ago, like 2,500 ago. Aristotle defined thinking about its forms and content, and doctors have been thinking about it for a while. And what is of special importance to us would be cognitive distortions. We might have just diseased vicious circle of our thinking processes. Okay, I'm quitting, or I'm never going to quit this group, this project, no matter how difficult it is for me. Again, or again, I'm going to leave and move. Where, how, why? I'm going to quit anyway. Like in the film, I need to paint, and you start painting over the wallpaper. The same about moving or staying or changing a job. Cognitive distortion are a form of mentality errors, and statistically, a lot of people suffer from them in the time of change. And over the past at least 3 years, we have entered a very long period of change, and it's very good that when such distortions do not really destroy our lives, and they can. And there are many types of cognitive distortions. There are more than 150 of them totally. There are different forms of classification. There might be more or less of them according to different classifications, but all of us are familiar with at least one cognitive distortion, which is the phenomenon of Dunning-Kruger. And at our conferences, it has been mentioned many times. This is the classical thing when a young specialist first is overestimating his or her abilities. I've done an interview for 3,000 in 3,000 cases, I think, 3,000 interviews, and I still remember some young guys who come in. Yes, for instance, they got a gold medal at school, they won an Olympic competition and received higher scholarship or something, and underwent some specific courses and asking for tasks which for young junior specialists are unsolvable. Out of, I've served for 1 month in the army, make me a general. I still remember when in modest Belarus, one young student approached me and said she's prepared to be paid for $2,000, but only as a respect to us. We smiled at her. We didn't say anything out loud, but I still remember those eyes. Next stage in our curve of this phenomenon, when it's going other way around, when the imposter syndrome, when a person thinks that he doesn't deserve what he gets, we still feel that we are not prepared, that we need to read 10 more books or work on yet another project, or other way around, when we have reached an optimal level, when after smoking a few hundred cigarettes, we finally make the right decision. This is an example of cognitive distortions, the ones that we have encountered in our life.
Oh, There's a very nice visualization of cognitive distortions. Another important thing is burnout. We also face this problem at work in ordinary conditions, but just imagine if we're relocating or preparing for relocation, we will be burning out much quicker. It's important to understand that this is a physiological state and it's not a result, it's a process. So we're burning a little bit, like chicken on the grill, and you need to control this situation in order to avoid extreme burnout. Since this is a process, not the result, we can gradually get boiled or burned like a frog. So this is emotional exhaustion, depersonalization. By this I mean that we behave as socially at work. Some rude jokes, bullying, etc. And it seems that it's okay for us. We need just to uh, somehow get energy from that. But we don't do bad for ourselves, but we also do bad for our team, because our friendly team might become very unfriendly. Reduction of professional skills and interests, a feeling that we are incompetent. There's additional information here as well about how emotional burnout occurs and what are the manifestations. So there's a change in behavior uh, when the humor becomes rude, some being late when you come late at work, and it works all together. Why am I coming late at work? We have time shifting. It's useful for us to work later with the clients. But if it's not the case, but still I come later. If I need to come at 9, I come at 11. If I need to come at 11, I come by 1 p.m. And I'm looking for the reasons for that. This is burnout. Just for the project, we try to rationalize this. And this starts developing and developing. Maybe you have seen this in your colleagues and even with yourself. There's a stress theory, and we also do see that this is a process, it's not a result. And the features manifestations, uh, loss of creative approach. For testers, for example, they are not looking for the root cause of the problem. You might spend time and find the family of defects, but no, you are very superficial. You are finding just very superficial minor defects, and that's it. The same for the developers. You understand that maybe there is a root cause for this problem, but instead of resolving this, you're just very reluctant. You don't have any creative approach. I think you felt the same way. In case of stress, this occurs more and more often. Now, a few words about the algorithm that I suggest to use. This is a self-diagnostic algorithm in order to understand whether we are okay or not. This design pattern template method that developers use. The steps in algorithm are quite standard, but the implementation might be different for different people. First step is to calculate return on investment, so called. We need to calculate what we gain and what we lose in the case of relocation. The algorithm will be tailor-made for you. For some people, career is important. For others, salary is important. For other people, changing the situation, the environment is important. If you attended a language courses like English language courses, any other courses, in each group there will be a person who believes that if he learns the language, everything will be fine if he moves to England or United States. But if you have problems with girls in your own country, I doubt that this will disappear. This problem will disappear in a new country. So it is important to adequately take this. So you need just to identify what is important for you. Again, family needs. We need to clearly state and formulate what are the needs of your family and what are the risks. So, of course, you cannot decide, children cannot decide on their own. You can talk to them, but you need to decide on their behalf to understand their needs and their risks and look from outside, because it might help. We'll give you an example. In Minsk, it's almost impossible to meet a stray dog. In Armenia and Georgia, there are plenty of stray dogs. They are nice, they are calm. I haven't seen any aggressive dogs. But if you're afraid of dogs, then you will be afraid of walking in the city. And these are the risks. And a person likes jogging, for example. And if you're afraid of dogs, and there are plenty of stray dogs, it will be impossible to jog outside. And this might be a decisive factor preventing you from moving to Georgia or Armenia. Other people, they like dogs, for example. They cannot have dogs at home. But here in Georgia or Armenia, here you can pet these dogs in the streets. And this might be a decisive factor as well. Medical care is another thing. If you're healthy, then and you're alone, it's not a risk for you. You can go to the country with poor medical care and expensive medical care. If you have kids, of course, kids get sick. I have 3 kids, and I know this. Well, again, if you are married or if you have relations without marriage, again, your partner might get pregnant, and you need to have good medical system. People who have health issues, for example, I have a number of health issues from my childhood. Despite my problems, I do sports, and I'm a master of sports. In some, and currently, for example, in Belarus, I know that in general the healthcare system is quite good. There are bad examples, of course, yes, scary stories, but in general, Belarusian medical healthcare system is okay, is good. And since I'm doing science in medical care, I will enjoy very good medical services and my children. So for me, it's a big advantage, and I need to have very good reasons to move out of Belarus. And you do this analysis for yourself and your family. Theoretical investigation, you shouldn't just to have a look at a guidebook about the country. It's okay when you go for a vacation. When you move to the country, then you need to review the situation there. There might be problems. You need to remember about the risks, and some practical investigation or study would be okay. I moved to Belarus. My friend is 20 years older than me, and he decided to move to the seaside. He sold an apartment in Minsk and moved to Crimea, to Alushta. He said that, well, it's not very interesting to live in the sea, and he decided to live in the mountains. But with his weight and height and his trauma, it is very risky because it's a little bit freezing in the morning during winter times. And after 2 years of living there, he sold out everything and moved back to Minsk. If he resided there for a couple of months, he would understand this nuance, or he would either not relocate at all or would buy an apartment near the sea where there is no freezing. And all of our self diagnostics. Tips and tricks. There are websites that show what kind of crimes occur in this or that city and their frequency, and with the building numbers, etc. So you could see the areas, the districts. If the gravest crime is still in a bike, then it's might be okay. But if the crimes are quite grave, like gangs or attacks on the streets, then of course you would not like to live there. This year I visited Kazakhstan, Almaty. I liked Almaty very much. Nice city. But I did a study and revealed that there are certain issues. You can have a look about the number of pawn shops in this town. Then you stand nearby one of the pawn shops and check who are coming in. 2, 3 young guys. It means either their grannies die, or maybe they are robbers and they are robbing guys because these pawn shops are flourishing. Then you can go to any trauma department at a hospital and look at the people who apply there. There were several people with a typical problem. Your right hand is broken. Your face is okay. That means that you're a robber. You're hitting people in the streets. And this is during daytime, during working hours. Again, it means that these are some robbers and attackers, and I don't want to go there with my kids, of course. And my wife will not be able to walk in the evening. So the city is nice fruits and vegetables, very beautiful city. It might seem that this is a dream city, but there's the reverse side. It does not mean that you should not move or relocate there. It just means that you need to assess all the risks, whether these risks are acceptable for you or not. What else? I recommend 3 books. These 3 books are recommended by a psychiatrist, and they are recommended not only for medical professionals but also to other people. So you might read these books. Sorry. Yeah, here it is. So that's all from my side. The time is up. I hope this information might be useful for you in your daily life, and you will be making informed decisions. Thank you, colleagues.